comes to Southern Conference, few know more than my next guest, SoCon John Hooper, MidMajorMadness.com. He is also ranked the best wide receivers, running backs, and quarterbacks in the Southern Conference on Medium. You can read his stuff on Medium. You can also at SoCon John 22. You can also read my stuff on Marky Billson. That's my morning monologue a lot that I do, and I generally post it on Medium and all this. But where to begin today? I guess to start with, have you seen that Jerry West, let's go back in the Southern Conference here, Jerry West is going to get the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Were you aware of this?
I did see that yesterday, I think, on Twitter. I did see that for the first time that I guess President Trump is going to award him with the Award of Freedom. So, I think that's very interesting, but certainly he's been a great ambassador for not only the NBA, but for the Southern Conference, if you look back over the years.
Yeah.
I think what he did, obviously, he's retired now, but the Lakers really haven't been the same since he was there. In a lot of ways, if you look at
to say the least, yes. I mean, now it's become a whining, he did it, she did it. No, I mean, just a mess right there. But more than that, I was going to say with Jerry West, I mean, I'm kind of remembering when President Obama gave the Medal of Freedom to Ernie Banks, who was going to go against that. I mean, that sort of thing. It's a similar thing. Jerry West, though, I don't know. I mean, if you're going to say the all-time Southern Conference basketball player, it'd be hard to go against him. I mean, maybe you can come up with a couple of other names or so, but he's the logo, but he also took West Virginia to a point away from the national championship, if I recall, in 1959 when, yes, West Virginia was still in the Southern Conference. It was a different look back then, let's face facts. I mean, ETSU was only in, I think, their third year of D1, but you still had the Citadel, you still had VMI. Davidson was still around in those long ago years. George Washington was a member. Furman, I believe, was still a member at the time and all this. So, there was some similarities and such. You could help me out with some other schools that might have been in 59 a member of the SoCon. But, I mean, think about that. We talk about two bids. He nearly took him to a national title. Is there anybody else that you would put in the list of greatest Southern Conference basketball player? I mean, I guess Steph Curry perhaps would be there. But anybody else?
I think you have to put, Keith Jennings, Mr. Jennings in there.
I'm not sure that, I mean, you tend to look at pro career. Yeah, well, if you go with pro career, and maybe you shouldn't do that. And Jennings was the second most prolific assist man in college basketball history when he left ETSU. So it's hard to argue there. And he was the only NBA player ETSU ever produced. But his career was not Steph Curry's, nor was it Jerry West's. I mean, in the NBA. That's the only point I'd say against that.
Oh, even Frank Selby had a pretty good career in the NBA. He didn't have a Jerry West career.
Yeah.
He had a solid career in the NBA. And I think that if you look at a guy like, was it Hot Rod Hundley?
Mm-hmm.
Played in West Virginia. He was another one. There's been so many guys that have come through. And I thought it was interesting the other day that I looked through the Raptors roster online, and they actually have a guy on their team that attended Furman for 2 years, Jordan Lloyd, actually transferred to Indianapolis University, which is a Division II school, and played his final 2 years there. So, there's been some guys that have kind of maybe made the NBA, made a couple of years, and but there's not been a guy like a Jerry West or a Steph Curry that really made that type of impact in the NBA. So I guess when you look at, if you want to go by drafting, you got to go with like Donnie Taylor, who was like the 17th pick in the modern era.
Mm-hmm.
They drafted, it was in the 1997 NBA draft. He never really panned out, but he was a spectacular college player for 2 years. He came out of Indian Hills Community College, which always produces a lot of good talent, and some that has come to the Southern Conference and been successful. So, I find it interesting. I tried to look for Chattanooga's roster online today, and it wasn't updated. So, just trying to put together some recruiting rankings, and I just thought it was interesting that their roster was not listed online. You go to their roster page, it lists their coaches.
Is this for basketball or football? Forgive me.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's basketball.
Okay.
So, but it's they've had to really bring in some guys in Chattanooga that do something right away. They got a transfer from Vanderbilt, and but going back to your point, I think it's hard to say that there's been anyone more successful than Jerry West at both what he did at West Virginia and then what he went on to do, obviously in the NBA as the logo, as you said. So, those are two very important factors that you would have to probably put in as the number one player ever in Southern Conference basketball history, and probably have to right now. And for the foreseeable future, I think you have to go with Steph Curry too.
Yeah, I mentioned here, would you put Jennings in there because he didn't have quite the pro career, he didn't have the pro career that either Curry or West did. But then again, if we're talking about Southern Conference play, maybe you should keep it to what they did in college. Look, if I'm saying who's the greatest college football player ever, maybe I go with Archie Griffith because he's got 2 Heismans and nobody else does. But, he wasn't all that good with the Bengals, as I recall. But, how do you, I can just scream at you, 2 Heismans, 2 Heismans, 2 Heismans. And I got a pretty strong argument right there. So should that be, second most prolific assist man at the time of his departure from ETSU, only player to take ETSU to the national rankings. Yeah, Jennings definitely deserves to be ranked among the best players. Question is just, okay, Steph Curry did take Davidson to the Elite Eight. Jerry West did take West Virginia to the final. So, that's another way to look at it, too. There
was a couple guys at VMI. I think it was Ron Carter, I believe, back in the 70s that took them to the Elite Eight. So, and Fred Hetzel back in the 60s with Davidson. There's a guy named Joe Holub that played at Georgetown as a very good player, I think in the late 50s or early 60s. But there's been some great Southern Conference basketball players if you look at just the entire history of the league. But few is, it's hard to make, it's hard for any ACC player to have a career like Jerry West or Steph Curry has had, in both college and pros. I guess maybe if you set the standard with those guys, there's very few guys in college basketball in general that have made the type of impact those guys have made. And the SoCon was fortunate enough to have both of those players. So, there's just been, there's been a few at Marshall, I think, that have gone on to.
Yeah.
Skip Henderson, I believe, was one that went on to, a pretty decent career. Gerald Wilkins at Chattanooga would be one I would put probably in there because he had a successful career with the Cleveland Cavaliers. So, there's some, obviously, that probably get overlooked more than others.
We're talking about this because Jerry West is going to get the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Hey, something we haven't talked about, you mentioned that Chattanooga didn't have any players on their basketball, on their website listed on their basketball roster. Now, the Chattanooga Times-Free Press last month came out with an article saying it was very difficult for a mid-major maybe to keep a player for 4 years. Maladen Armas would be a very good example of this, or Samford a couple of years ago, or Bubba over at VMI transferring to Georgia Tech, or just so many players. But the question, I guess, is, okay, but then how did Wofford keep, Fletcher McGee for 4 years? And for that matter, it looks like ETSU has done a pretty good job of not having their players transfer up, with maybe the exception of Armas. And there are those that'll ask, did he really transfer up to Boise State? Still, a question, I guess, is, What do you think? Should mid-majors be focusing more on junior college players, in your opinion? Or is there still a place for, let's just say, Bo Hodges for the ETSU fans, or a McGee, to play 4 years in mid-major basketball, in Southern Conference basketball? What are your thoughts there?
Well, it's funny you should mention that. Do you know the last SoCon freshman of the year not to transfer?
The last freshman of the year, I'll say Francis Alonso.
No, it was Fletcher McGee.
Ah, it's Fletcher McGee. Well, I always liked Alonzo. I always thought Alonzo was just a little bit better shooter, and I know his stats don't necessarily plan that out, but I would just watch the games and I'd see Alonzo. I used to joke he would make shots by sense of smell with a guy's hand in his face, just on instinct. And then McGee, and I know nobody ever made more three-pointers than he did in the history of D1 college basketball, but still, he was 0 for 12 against Kentucky. He needed maybe he had a cold and couldn't get the shot down by sense of smell. I don't know. Maybe that was his problem or something. But yes,
well, it's an interesting question you asked, I think, because I've heard a couple coaches say this, and regarding JUCOs, and Dustin Kearns, who I'm writing an article on now, should be out sometime later this week at Appalachian State. We had an hour conversation the other day. And he said, it's not, JUCO guys are, he said it depends on what the fit of your program is. Like he said, I see so many coaches that come into certain programs and that are not familiar with that landscape, or, they have a bad season and they try to change their identity as a program and then just try to take a bunch of JUCO transfers and are not familiar with that landscape and, the team dynamic and what you have to do, like, say a Coach Forbes is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not familiar with that, it's a very dangerous road to walk, I think. And so I've heard coaches say that, unless you know what you're doing, it's probably not the way to go. But having said that, he said, would you take, he said, if you had an immediate need, and he said this is happening more and more in college basketball because kids are transferring out. And so, for instance, at Wofford, Teve Aluma goes to Virginia Tech. That affects their depth. So maybe they take a JUCO guy, and to kind of keep their depth there and keep the dam from breaking, so to speak, altogether as far as depth goes. So there's an interesting dynamic that is presenting itself in college basketball that has not in the past of transfers and grad transfers and immediate availability and eligibility and stuff like that. So I think in the past 2 or 3 years it's ballooned a little bit, and the question is, should I be patient and wait on a guy that might fall through the cracks, or if I'm not familiar with this whole new landscape of JUCOs and taking JUCOs, how will they mix with my team? Will I be the right fit? It's one thing that, like Coach Hearn said, the guy might fit all the regulars that you look at, as far as the game he's got. But if he's not a great team guy, locker room guy, then that's not going to be a great fit. And
Yeah.
That's why he said. But if you're familiar with the landscape, he's like, I don't see any problem with it.
Well, just one of the things I always thought that it was very. I'll be really mild with my commentary here. Odd that so many ETSU fans, they were, Carl Torbush is building a Buccaneers the right way. He's not using JUCO transfers. Meanwhile, they'd go, heavens to Betsy to Murgatroyd, as I quote Snagglepuss or whatever I'm doing right here, over Steve Forbes bringing in every JUCO that he could. And I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't, the same school. How are they doing it both differently, and you're both praising them for this? I know one is football, I know one is basketball, but still, you mentioned here the transfer. I don't know. I just think SoCon John Hooper that there's nothing wrong with bringing in the JUCOs in any sport, in my opinion. And although I do think that the good SoCon teams, Wofford, ETSU, maybe with the exception of Armis, they've kind of proven they can keep those players around and all that. Now, maybe not.
No,
Yeah.
it's funny because I think before Steve Forbes was good at. There was a coach in the league that was good, sort of similar at knowing the JUCO landscape and being able to recognize talent, not only talent, but what would be a good fit for his program. And he did that with multiple positions open. He